Hey YouTubers, alright, I've been able to reposition myself to a more favorable location so I wouldn't impose on that family's wonderful picnic they were having up here at Pride Mountain, actually Pride Winery overlooking the valley. If you get a chance, come check them out. They do have a couple charge points right here. The wine is impeccable. You can bring some food and go have a beautiful lunch with either your better half, your family, overlooking yeah, the Sonoma and the Napa Valley. So, touching back, just a disclaimer: what I declare here, I do so under penalty of perjury, to be the truth. Um, and I'll be putting some like little commercials out there. I don't have the commercials that I see on some of these other channels, but I think I'll start making my own commercials, like one for Kia and Jim Bone out there in Santa Rosa. Um, So hopefully bring in some folks, check out the commercials, and maybe visit my channel and support what's going on right here. And so I wanted to dip back into this crazy circumstance that happened yesterday. I got into this really interesting debate with somebody that's relative to these matters. Um, and when I talk about the child abuse that was um, suffered here in Napa County, I often say that child welfare services didn't do anything to protect my sister or I, as they should have. But just to be a little bit more clear on that, they actually did send Billy Bartow to prison um, for what he had done. So it started off over on Marshall Avenue. There's a debate on whether it was Sweetbriar or Marshall, which Sweetbriar makes no sense because the times don't align. Um, but the abuse that was endured at the age of roughly 4 to 5, that's where it started. Then it goes over to um, the Lincoln Apartments, and that's where that incident happened, where there actually was a prosecution that took place, and somebody went to prison, was held accountable. However, there was other things that were going on that were not um, known at that time that got glossed over, and that wouldn't be to the fault of child welfare services for that particular instance. But then it goes forward to the age of 9 over in American Canyon on Elliott Avenue at Napa Junction, where Mr. Kite, the teacher, noticed the excessive bruising, and I was sent to the office. Child Welfare Services was activated and sent over there. They had me take off my shirt and everything. He took the pictures, and then supposedly that's when the warning was given that, oh, if this happens again, that we'll remove your son. And in hindsight, my sister didn't really endure a lot of the physical part of that, as far as like the hold on one second. Like I said, there's complimentary charge points. So whenever there's an opportunity to get some plug-in time, I get it. Uh, so that was the incident, that violence that took place over on Elliott, and the other stuff that happened. Like I said, those two parents had a problem with gambling. So do other family members. It's almost like an addictive personality trait that's in the family. Um, and they would take off and gamble and leave us places. Like I said about Circus, my sister and I just being given keys to the room and just money to go to the Midway, and we would be paged maybe twice during the whole day while my mother would be gambling on the floor. Then she'd come and she would page us and let us know how she was doing, give us more money. But as a parent now, I just can't comprehend leaving my child like that in a casino, to just, you know. And if you don't know about Circus, that's in Reno. There's the Midway where kids can go, and then there's the casino floor and buffets and restaurants where children are allowed to go, and we were just allowed free roaming to accommodate the gambling addiction. But that gambling addiction, they would leave us with a myriad of people, and when you do that, then you put your children at risk, obviously. Um, and so yeah, like I said, Elliott Drive, there was a lot that didn't really didn't get handled, and there was a paper tiger warning given to my mother and my stepfather at that time. But then, like I said, they were emboldened, just like the alcoholic issues that I'm dealing with now, rather than people actually being steadfast and proactive and like, no, they just kind of willy nilly deal with things. And instead of it addressing the issue, it emboldens it, or emboldens the people that are carrying out the negative behavior. So at 12, you get the incident that took place at Kentwood Apartments. Um, and like I said, the violence just continued and continued and continued. And this is violence that was handed down to them, but I can't use that as a proper justification, right? So the craziness about one of the most craziest things about this is one of the most violent people in this dynamic was claiming to have been in Vietnam and been in the shit, and that's, claimed PTSD and all this stuff. It wasn't called PTSD back then, but they justified being in Vietnam and being in the trenches and all that as a reason for beating a child. And it wasn't until that person passed and me serving that I understood how to read his duty 214 that yes, he was in Vietnam. For sure he was. He was without a doubt in Vietnam. But he was out on a boat in the ocean. He was not in the trenches. He wasn't with the infantry or anything. I knew he was in the Navy, but there's still Navy people that were up front line and, corpsmen and all kinds of stuff. But this individual was not that. And I became suspicious after I joined the military because things just didn't add up. It just didn't make no sense. And whenever I would try to, talk about it or anything, that person would get very upset and angry. He's done passed on now, but I had to make a decision to either take human life or run away from home. So I made the sacrifice of running away, and I'm going to take you guys to those places and to like that outcropping, the elevators that I slept in, and we'll even interview some of the people that I was friends with that are grown adults who also went to the Army later on. Some good friends, some good brothers. And but yeah, that individual. Yeah, my guests are gonna be out here pretty soon, so it's bizarre that this individual was trying to use Vietnam as a justification for harming children. But I later put two and two together that it was really his mother and that handed this abuse down to him, and more than likely her mother who handed it down to her. And it was this generational, but he didn't want to verbalize it as such because then it would be like he'd have to be holding his mother accountable, and that's another conflict of interest, or another thinking error that is often um, hard to confront for some of these people, to be like, hey, this person is toxic, their behavior has to stop. But they're like, oh, but it's my brother, oh, it's my mother. And we have to hold anybody accountable, whether it's our spouse, whether it's ourselves, whether it's our employers, whoever it has to be. And so it took decades for me to get to a point to where I could freely discuss everything. And some people are going to be like, oh, why could you throw your wife out there? And why could you say this? And why could you say that? None of them are seeming to, like the people that I'm talking about in these videos. I'll be eager to hear when people either try to defend their actions or try to justify it. But instead of them saying, yeah, that individual's behavior is not acceptable, they would say that it's not acceptable to put that forward because you're shaming them or anything. Man, shame is a weapon. If they can use that against you to shame you for having suffered, then That's not empowerment. You have to empower yourself to be able to go past the shame. And that's what I had to do from all the hardship that I went through. Because in order for you to get help, you got to be able to talk to people and tell them the pain of what happened. Because until you get there, you're going to depend on things like alcohol or drugs or violence or whatever. Because you're ashamed or afraid to tell people what you suffered. Because, shame, guilt, you're worried they may judge you, they may weaponize it and use it against you, which can potentially happen. But fortunately for me, I was able to get to that point, so they can't do that no more. So that's empowerment, because you need to be able to press past the shame or to be able to get the help that you need, so that you can empower yourself, right? And what I've been alluding to here is, as a result of the suffering that I have, and that I've endured, is I know I have a monster inside of me, and it's like, it's not me though. It's not who I am or what I am, but my monster likes or wants to hurt people that hurt other people. So that was a good thing for when you join the army, because that's usually who you're sent to go handle. So it went perfectly. But once we came back from deployment, or it started in Fort Benning, Georgia, or the monster, and I'm not talking, this is just metaphorically, the monster is just a description of that feeling that, like, hey, I need to go do something. Like if you see somebody harmed, to go run over there and fight the person to stop them and all that. For me, that's my monster. And because that monster can be detrimental to me as well, and it has. It's been consequential. And that I have an elevated responsibility to control that monster, especially when it comes to, my son. Because if I don't control the monster and I go try to fix somebody else's problems, and I face consequence to pull me away from my son when he needs me, so that he doesn't have to be alone when he's going through any battle he may have to go through, then I fail my son. So I have an elevated responsibility. But after Fort Benning, Georgia, that's when I realized that, like, hey, there's something within me that wants to go fight against the people that are similar to the people that did me harm for whatever reason. If I see pain and suffering, I want to go do something about it. And after we came back from deployment, there was things that's happened. I'm going to tell you all some of those stories. And that's when I realized that, the monster was there. And so I went and asked for help. And the Army started putting me into treatment. And that's when they started dipping into the things that happened in my past. And they were like, yo, because of all the abuse and the hardship you went through, we shouldn't have let you in. So that was hard, because I really love the Army and I love my brothers, and that was hard to hear. But I let the monster out a few times over there, and I'll go through some of those stories. Obviously, not all of them, but I took the leash off and let it run with it, and it concerned me enough that I was like, hey, can you guys help me? And to this day, my brothers are still there. They were there when we went through this thing here in court. And why I'm expressing all this and why I took you guys to the veterans home is crucial, because that's what I was talking to my brother about on the phone when this individual from Napa Empowering Women's Services was in the parking lot, I believe, to pick up her child, and she was just sitting there listening to me. And so they started cooking up this little scheme to try to make that into some kind of, to try to put me in the same box as that dude. I cited what he did as a negative thing, that, like, hey, the people like that go through this hardship and need help, that dude's whole everything is just gone. He could have been the best dude. He could have saved 100 lives. Nobody will ever know, because it's just that right there. And sometimes people will try to weaponize pain against people, like in these court battles over for children. And that's what the respondent in this matter did. And she's tethered to these other people who physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and sexually give themselves over to active gang members and, you guessed it, murderers, right? The very last people in the world that I have any desire to have around my child or to be in their orbit. Like, hey, do you do you? Um, and so those people have these chaotic life choices and associations, but they do these jobs and they have these labels and these titles, which wouldn't necessarily shouldn't impact Napa Empowered Women's Services. But these individuals are using the Napa Empowered Women's Services platform and what they do and who they know um, as a mask to be like to try to facilitate this divide they try to create with my son. You know, it's just like, wow. So fortunately, the judge kind of was able to, look, be a good arbiter, but their attempt to do that, it was crazy. So that's why it was important to take you guys to the veterans home in Yountville, because we discussed that and to show y'all how sick these people are, that they would try to do further harm to somebody who was hurt here and who's battled through addiction, PTSD, then all this crazy stuff to be a father. And they are the one, like literally, they're the ones, their relatives and them themselves, them are the ones that were facilitating the alcoholism. It was her daughter that was meeting up with my spouse and getting her drunk, and because her man was cheating on her, and then watching her get behind a car and drive home. So what if she would have crashed and my son and I have to bury my wife and he has to bury his mom? For what? Because of their life choices, their decisions to maintain relationships that are just toxic. And that's what I mean about the insanity of how these enablers, they bounce off each other. And it's like they almost gravitate towards each other to ensure they have somebody to be like, no, what you're doing is okay, instead of saying, hey, let's figure out how to fix this. What do we got to do? What do you need from me, within reason, to help? But they don't do that. Instead they just dance around the fire. And so, as opposed to coming forward with the truth, they came with this sick, disgusting attempt to try to press my son away from me. And it's kind of crazy, because they're the very same people who were supposed to be looking after people like me. The respondent in my matter didn't endure child abuse like that, or violence, or any kind of sexual abuse. The closest thing that she's had to that is her mother. Her biological father was leaving her mother, because men can't really deal with her mom. She's had multiple. She had a husband. He couldn't deal with her. He left. The father of her two sons, and then her other daughter Cynthia. The father, I don't know where he's at, but again, then the youngest, which would be my spouse, her father had enough, and he was leaving. So the mother called the police and made some frivolous report that he had been sexually abusing my spouse, and they came to arrest him, and she made her say that yes, it was true. But then from the story she explained to me, that right before they were putting him in the police car, she looked at her father and saw that he was distraught and he was begging for her to tell the truth, and so she broke and she told the truth. Now that's definitely sick and abusive for her mom to do that. And this is the same person who had the drug addicts take over her property and ended up hooking up with the one drug addict. I mean, this family has just been chaos after chaos, and the expectation of me to my spouses has been like, hey, either these people get it together, or we need to keep them away from our son until they don't. And the response, of course, was like, if you don't allow it, then it's like she would, scorch our marriage. And then the expectation was that, hey, I'm still going to have them around these people. We're still going to still do this negative behavior, and there ain't nothing you can do about it, because I work for Napa County. I'm a social worker. They'll believe me. They won't believe you. And she has all these people, and now I'm starting to realize more and more. Everybody that I've been sent to go to, when I go to court, the court says you need to go to legal aid. I go to legal aid. Legal aid tells me they can't deal with it because it exceeds the scope. And we're going to get into legal aid because I do have a bone to pick with him. I mean, I have a thumbs up, but then I have some thumbs down. Keep in mind, folks, I'm dealing with murder, kidnapping, and a whole bunch of other stuff that most people won't be able to fathom. And that's an obstacle I've had to get past more often than not in this circumstance. But every time I'm sitting down with these people, I really have to accept that she's a county employee, they're a county employee, so they're going to try to protect the county. And so my son's safety and well-being is going to be second and third to that, to them, but not to me. So at some point in time, these videos and this will be from one side of the country to the other. People have been coming here. I met some folks last night, and those people that I meet, I know you guys are the right people that will help me spread this message and to shed light on what they're doing here in Napa County and the insanity of the dilemma. I gotta go. It's time to go have some fun and enjoy this beautiful thing that we call Napa Valley here.